I was also struck in my conversation with him by one thing in particular, which was that his reaction to his realization that the wool had seriously been pulled over his eyes, you might say, in relationship to his son, who fell afoul of the woke mob. And and I could see in that moment, which he made public, essentially during the interview that we put up on X, that he was truly at war. Like, Elon is not happy about gender affirming care, let's say. Like, seriously, 100% committed, not happy. And so that was an interesting glimpse into his depth of commitment, and he's definitely a single-minded person. He's a single-minded person who puts his single-mindedness to use in multiple fields of endeavor, which is an interesting thing to see. Creative and single-minded is a rare combination, but he's got that. And he's definitely the sworn enemy of the woke mob. That's for sure. And so they picked on the wrong guy.
I think that interview with you and him was extremely interesting and important. Obviously, anybody that's going to buy a $44 billion company has a lot of motivations to do that. I mean, one of them, he said he was worried about being censored himself. But I thought that interview with you, where he talked about what had happened to his son and the tragedy that is, and the anger and the sense in which he needed to, he was like, we needed to shut down the woke mob, so it would stop, harming children. I mean, mutilating, and I mean, it's awful. So, I mean, I thought that was a very powerful moment, because it was a way of saying, because he kind of goes, his bucket list is Mars, like, he's like, that's his thing, and it wouldn't be my priority, but that's his ambition and vision. But he understands that it has a bunch of preconditions, and one of them actually is having a civilization, and having a civilization, one of the preconditions of that is having freedom of speech, and that the woke mob was a threat to everything he cared about, including his own family, and had suffered from it. So I thought that was, in fact, it's actually in the current draft of our book. We tell the story of you talking to him in that book, because we think it's such a symbolically extremely, I mean, you get to a level of nihilism with the gender affirming care that it's just so extreme. It's literally a humans trying to change the most fundamental part of nature, and then doing the most nihilistic thing, which is sterilizing your children. It's like hard to imagine how you get, it's hard to imagine how much it gets worse than that. And then you kind of go, it's hard to figure out how you come back from it. I mean, the people who did it, first of all, it needs to end, but then the people who did it, there's an accounting there. I mean, that's really bonkers stuff, And I think the same thing for the censorship, that we need to right the civilization back, get it on firmer foundations. There needs to be an accounting in the same way there was around, say, CIA abuses in the 70s, or the way there has been around priests harming children in the Catholic Church. An accounting is required. And of course, the only way you can have that accounting is with freedom of speech, to be able to shine the sunlight and expose the misdeeds.
Yes. Well, that's especially true for the purveyors, the sadistic purveyors of transformative surgery on minors. I believe those people should be prosecuted on the grounds of crimes against humanity, because that's what they were. I mean, first of all, minors cannot give informed consent to that sort of medical treatment. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no debate about that. I can understand there are circumstances under which minors have to give consent because there's no one else to speak for them. But the idea that unpopular, autistic, and otherwise challenged 13-year-old girl with body dysmorphia issues can fully understand how she's being deceived by a cabal of evil, sadistic, profit-hungry, ideologically demented, sadistic surgeons is zero. And so there is accountability that needs to be meted out. And I would say the same thing with regards to the purveyors of the idea that the Hunter Biden laptop story was Russian disinformation. It's like, that's though that was a traitorous act. And I think, you tell me what you think. I watched Trump claim that the election was stolen. And I know that when that was devolved down to the level of detail, that he didn't win any significant court battles. But my sense with Trump always has been that, well, he might get the details wrong, but he's a pretty good big picture guy. And the timing of that kicking, say, the New York Post off of Twitter really soon before the election, that was a narrow margin, that election. And my sense is that if the media would have told the truth about the Hunter Biden laptop story, that Trump would have won. And, there's no way of proving that, but the mere fact that it exists as a possibility means that was one seriously traitorous act. And it was very well thought through. It wasn't a mistake, as you said, because part of the plan was to lay the groundwork for deceiving the public about any potential future revelations. And the fact that Mr. Hunter Biden was pardoned by his miserable, deceitful, enabling father for any potential crimes committed during that entire period speaks volumes.
From the year where Biden fired the prosecutor who was investigating the company that his son was on the board of in Ukraine, of course, 2014, it was tens of millions of dollars, including from the Chinese, basically the Chinese elites who are tied in with the Chinese military intelligence, going to the Biden family. Like you said, who knows if it makes a difference? That's the main event. That particular information operation is the main event. Also, people have to be held accountable for it. Jordan, one of the things, the direction that our own book has taken is that in each of these cases, we have kind of asked, like on the case of the gender affirming care with the, particularly we talk about the case of Jazz Jennings, the boy before he was allowed to go through puberty, had genital surgery. The question we keep coming up was, where were the men? Where were the gentlemen? Actually, and this is where the Mansfield concept of the gentleman came in handy. Where were the gentlemen to step up and prevent these atrocities from taking place? And I mean on all of them: gender affirming care, censorship led by the intelligence community. That's where the director of Central Intelligence, or whoever it is, the head of Aspen Institute, which was the main purveyor of malicious activity around the Hunter Biden laptop. Traditionally, and I'm not saying they're always men, but traditionally the men in those institutions say, wait. We're a country of laws. We're a democracy. We're a free speech. We don't mess with the bodies of children who can't give consent, much less their genitals. Where were the men stepping up and doing that? And we talk in our book about your brilliant conversation with Camille Paglia, who's also shown up in our book in a big way. And I think you really got at this challenge, which is, how do you stand up to these pathological women? And in many of these cases, not always, often it's standing up to pathological men, which I agree is actually easier. But we do see there's a lot of research coming out about now how, the rising role of women in universities. Corey Clark in particular is a brilliant, I think maybe one of the best of our generation, has shown how, with evolutionary psychology, the tendency of women, is to level, it's to bring women that are too proud of themselves down, and then to bring women that are too down on themselves up, and then to ostracize people that threaten them or their own power. That when that and then men have a stricter hierarchy. They don't want to evict anybody from the hierarchy, even if they want to keep the weaker men for cannon fodder. They'll keep them in the hierarchy. They're not going to ostracize. She argues that and of course it's not something you can prove. It's not, we're not living in that level of causality. But she argues that increase of women and a women's way, which is not demonizing at all. It's just in a different way of relationships, has played a big role in cancel culture, in censorship. But of course, the other thing you have to say is, the men are also affected by that process of feminization, which, by the way, also Nietzsche, we forget he talks about nihilism. He was also talking about the effeminization of men, the weakening of men in the society. So it's all, for me, it all comes to that picture, which is you get these people running around trying to censor people or trying to spread disinformation about the Hunter Biden laptop or trying to do genital surgeries on kids. That's traditionally when the strong gentlemen say, no, we're not going to do that. And they have been absent. And, God and by the way, God bless you for your intervention, because your intervention as a man has been more significant than any other intervention. I think it stands in contrast to Andrew Tate. I worry about Andrew Tate. I worry about not just about Andrew Tate. I worry about people like him attracting, Generation Z Zoomer men. We need them to orient towards you and the gentleman and a healthy masculinity, not because I think they're going to flee from that toxic femininity, as they should, and they are. We know the big gender gap between younger men and women, but we want them to orient towards a picture of being a gentleman, of a citizen and in service, and not towards this nihilistic, misogynistic, manly, toxic masculine man of the Andrew Tate type.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of comments about that. So, in the story of Genesis, each sex has its original sin. And it establishes the pattern of weakness that is the primary temptation for women and for men. The primary temptation of women is to clutch the serpent to their breast in the presumption that their all-consuming compassion can envelop the world. So it's pride.
Wow.
It's union of pride and compassion. Yeah, brutal.
Wow.
Brutal. But the sin of Adam is to accede to the demands of his wife when she goes too far. He's weak.
Wow.
And you see that in two ways. The first way you see is that he accepts the apple from Eve, even though he's cognizant of its toxic origin. And he does that in part because he's prideful enough to assume that his machinations can deal with her overreach. Yes. And then the second indication of his weakness is that when God asks him how he discovered that he was naked, so he's become self-conscious. That's a good way of thinking about it. He's conscious of his own vulnerability. He immediately blames the woman, right, and God. And so the weakness of women, you might say, the historical weakness of women is to take pride in their compassion and to make that to elevate that to the highest place. That's the usurping element. That's the usurpation of God, to make compassion itself even the essence of morality. And that's to eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then the sin of Adam is to be weak when called upon to kowtow by his partner.
Amazing.
And yeah.
Brutal. It's amazing, Jordan. I have to say, I never properly understood the Adam and Eve story until you tell it. And of course, it lends this insight, which is our whole book is about that dynamic that you're describing. We call it pathocracy. It's in the institutions. And you see in the men often, and I see it with that now I'm around academics, and you realize that all of them had suffered under this totalitarian university culture. And I think a lot of them, they're just like, look, I just wanted to do my work. I didn't want to have to be involved in politics. I didn't come be a university professor to have to be involved in this. And so you now know that actually you can't actually pursue your profession or your calling without also accepting your responsibilities as a citizen.
It's what you said about
gentleman.
Musk. Yes, exactly. That gets us back to that issue of subsidiary responsibility. It's like, no, if you don't shoulder your political obligation, then the tyrants will take the right to do so out of your hands and use it against you.